Thank you for standing by and welcome to the 21st Century Leadership Conference Call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. There will be a presentation followed by a question and answer session. I must advise you that this conference is being recorded today on Friday the 23rd of March 2012. I would now like to hand the conference over to your first speaker today, Mr. James Turner. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Cara. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on 21st Century Leadership. As Cara says, my name is James Turner. I'm the Training Director at Computerworld. If you don't know who Computerworld are very well, we are a learning and development company who, alongside our IT training solutions, we provide leadership programs and coaching and mentoring services as well. And we're a long-time partner of Skillsoft, who we consider that they provide the best e-learning and knowledge resources in the world. In a minute, I'm going to hand over to Taavo so he can introduce himself, and then at the end, I will come back on and once Taavo has answered some questions that you may have, we'll allow sort of 5 minutes at the end of that. If we aren't able to answer all the questions online, we will then get back to you offline and answer your questions. Also, if you're listening to this as a recording, we will give you the information you need to get in touch with us. So I'm going to hand over to Taavo now, and we will listen in.
Good morning, and actually good afternoon, everyone. I'm Taavo Godtfredsen, and I'm speaking to you today from Newburyport, Massachusetts, which is about 45 minutes north of Boston. And let me give you a little bit of background on myself before we talk about 21st century leadership today. I've been very fortunate. I've spent the last 12 years now working with over 200 CEOs, best-selling business authors, such as John Smith from the BBC, Jack Welch from GE, Benazir Bhutto, and also Bill Ford, John Cotter, and many others. And so today's presentation is very much a synthesis of their ideas. And before I jump into the 4 practices I'm going to be talking about today, let me just provide a little bit of context around leadership that I think will help provide an important lens for this presentation today. The perspective is this: I don't believe there's a magic formula to leadership. I think there are many business authors out there that are looking for that magic formula, if you will, and I think leadership is highly contextual. And I think great leaders come in many different shapes, forms, and sizes. And I think leadership is contextual to the industry, to a company, to a culture, to an organization's competitive standing, and maybe where they're trying to go in their particular marketplace. So keeping that in mind, I do think there are some important practices to be successful today. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to talk about these practices with you today, and then before I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit around how leadership has changed over the last 10 years, because I think it has. It's changed dramatically, and so we'll talk about that. And so when you look at each of these elements, I'm going to focus on the bottom 3 here, on seek perspective, energize the team, and collaborate to innovate. But let me just first say a few things about leveraging signature strengths. The one observation I've had when I'm sitting down with CEOs is I'll sit down with them for at least a full hour. And the one thing that becomes very clear to me is each of these leaders have a signature strength about them. And they carry that all the way in their careers, which really gets to where they are today. And so let me give you an example of that. I was in Paris a few weeks ago, and I had the wonderful opportunity to interview Vivek Bandrith. He's the CEO of Orange Business. And as you may know, Orange Business has around 30,000 employees. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. They're part of France Telecom. And in my interview with Vivek, what was unique about Vivek was his signature strength was listening. And the signature piece in this is how he listens. So think about your signature strength, which is unique to you? It's a difficult question to answer because I think we're really good at understanding maybe our weaknesses, but we don't take the time to understand what our true strengths are. And in the case of Vivek, listening was certainly his, and his perspective was leaders and managers are moving so fast that they aren't taking the time to truly listen to find out the message behind the message, what's really going on. And so what he does is he spends a lot of his time out of his office meeting with employees on the front line and learning from them around opportunities in the business, ways to align the business. And that way he knows where to marshal resources and drive growth for the organization. And when you spend time with Vivek, you see a wonderful tranquility about him. And so you really can see firsthand around how he truly listens and really listens for context. And another aspect to why I think strengths are so important around focusing on them is the Gallup organization has found that when individuals are focused on their strengths, they are 73% more likely to be engaged in their organizations. And think about that. They're 73% more likely to be engaged in their organizations. And I think what is truly a difficult challenge that I see with managers today is they focus so much on who employees are not versus who employees truly are. And if we focus more on who we are and our strengths, I think we're going to be that much more successful. So why don't we go ahead now and jump in and talk about how leadership is changing. I'm not sure how many of you have seen this study by IBM. They interviewed 1,500 CEOs from around the world. And it's the first time that I've ever seen, and when they asked the question, what is the most important leadership or management characteristic that you want to see in your organization? And it's the first time I've seen creativity come up as number one. CEOs cited creativity as the most important leadership attribute over the next 5 years. Integrity came number two, and global thinking came up number three. Now, why did creativity come up number one? And I think it's here where 8 out of 10 CEOs anticipate significant complexity ahead, yet less than half feel prepared to handle it. The truth is the world is changing so quickly because of globalization and technology that there are many CEOs out there who are truly scared around the implications of that change and how they are going to adapt in their marketplace. And so that's why I think creativity came up as so important. The other aspect to this research, and we did our own research, and we got 1,100 responses from workers around the world. And what we first wanted to understand was how leadership is truly changing. And so when you look at this slide, the first question we wanted to ask was, what were the most important leadership characteristics of leaders 10 years ago? Of leaders 10 years ago. Think of a 20th century leader. So as you look at these characteristics here on this slide, what do you think, again, thinking about 10 years ago, what mattered most to be a successful leader? Take a second and think about it. What mattered most to be a successful leader 10 years ago? Well, this is what came back to us. Ambitious, decisive, intelligent, competent, determined, dependable. Now, think about this list again, and what does it mean to be a successful leader today? If you had to pick out the characteristics to be a successful leader today, what would those be? And this is what they are. Relationship builder, high integrity, forward-looking, curious, creative, collaborative, global perspective. So a few important points here. One, think about the leader of yesterday was more about the leader as the individual hero. I think successful leaders today are about empowerment. They're highly collaborative. It's really about achieving great things through other people. Another important message here in this is notice that not one characteristic is the same between a leader yesterday and a leader today. Not one is the same. Also, think about the IBM CEO study. Notice how our study marries that as well. So CEOs and employees are saying the same thing in terms of what they want from a leader. Now, we're talking a lot about how leadership is changing, and let me just share one story with you how leadership will never change. And this is a story about Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall Goldsmith is considered the world's top executive coach. He wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And Marshall's become a dear friend. And about a year ago, we spent 3 hours walking around New York City. And I asked Marshall, I said, look, Marshall, you've worked with the greatest CEOs. What do all of the great CEOs have in common, if anything? And he thought for a moment, and he took his hand, and he touched his heart like this. And he said, you know, Taavo, all of the great ones deeply care about their people, truly care about their people. And it was uncanny because a couple days later, I had the opportunity to interview Nicole Piasecki. She's an executive at Boeing. And she worked for Alan Mulally, who's now at Ford Motor Company. And Alan Mulally won the CEO of the Year award this year. And I asked her about her experience in working with Alan Mulally. And unprompted, she said to me, Taavo, nobody cares more about people than Alan Mulally. So I think a true litmus test today for great leadership, I think you can be an okay leader, but if you want to be a great leader, I think the true litmus test is if you really love leading people. If you love leading people, you care about people, that is one element of leadership that will never, ever change. Okay. Let's talk about the remaining three practices. And the first practice I'm going to jump into is seek perspective. Seek perspective, I think, has two elements to it. One is a perspective around how you show up as a leader. I think we get so busy in our work, we aren't taking the time to understand how we're showing up as leaders and getting feedback on how we can get better every single day. And I think one of the most important mindsets leaders need to have today is around continuous improvement. How am I getting better every day? How am I getting feedback to get better every day? And then the other side of perspective is how to see the truth in a very intense way around where your team is, where your business is, what's happening in the marketplace. And so you're juxtaposing an internal view and an external view around getting the truth about that perspective. And I'm going to share a story with you right now around a CEO who I think has done an exceptional job at this. And this CEO is Vikas Kapoor. He's the CEO of a company called iCor. iCor is a global company that got 9,000 employees. They're a business process outsourcing firm. And when you talk to Vikas, he will tell you that the most important role of a leader is to define reality. And this is about seeking perspective. And he's actually put a practice in place inside his organization to get that perspective, to define reality, to see in a very intense way where his business is. And so he set up a process called Emergency Room Fridays. So every Friday at 10 a.m., any employee in the organization can come to this town hall and present any challenge inside the organization, anything. It can be an internal issue, it can be external, it can be about people, processes, customers, technology, you name it. So anyone can surface a problem. And as Vikas told me, He shared with me, you know what? I tell employees they get lots of points for defining reality, right? Surfacing bad news. Lots of points for doing that. Don't worry if your solution doesn't work. He will tell employees, don't worry if your solution doesn't work. And so he was tested. A group of employees presented an important challenge regarding a software solution. And when they rolled it out, it had huge issues in the marketplace. And in the thick of this challenge, VCAS came into that town hall, went to that team in front of everyone, and presented them with huge bonus checks. And he looked at all the employees and he said, look, I told you, you get points for defining reality. Don't worry if your solution doesn't work. And he said 6 months later, that team cracked the code. So think about your own teams in your own organization. What's your version of an emergency room Friday? How do we surface bad news quickly so we can adapt and innovate around those problems and challenges? And how do we provide the freedom to do that in our organizations? Now we're going to go to energize the team. And let me start off with another story. Robert Sutton, who's a professor at Stanford, he wrote a book called Good Boss, Bad Boss. I happened to be in the room when he was pressed with this question. And the question is this. Bob, you've been studying, great managers for many, many years. What separates a great manager from a bad manager? What's that one thing? And Bob said, "Oh, I can't do that. There's not just one thing. There are many variables." And the person pressed again. They said, "Come on, if you had to land on one thing, what would that be?" And Bob said, "Okay, if you're pressing me, and I just had to pick one thing that really separates a good boss from a bad boss, he said it'd be this. When you leave a conversation with that manager, maybe it's in their office, maybe it's in the hallway, do you leave with more energy or less? Do you leave with more energy or less?" And if you think about it, Rob Cross has done a lot of research in this area, and I think this is where Bob got this perspective, which is it's the whole concept around being a positive force in your organization, a positive energizer. And what the research tells us around positive energizers and the work of Rob Cross is these energizers, these bosses, where they leave you with more energy, they're not introverted or extroverted. That's not a variable that matters. But the variables that do matter are they tend to be optimistic, and also the individual knows that that particular manager has their back, that they care about that person deeply, that they have their best interests in mind. And when those pieces are in place, then you have the capability to be an energizing boss. So let's take this concept of being an energizing boss and look at it in a different way, and looking at it across your organization. How many of you know this game? This game is called Chutes and Ladders. It's a game I love to play with my kids, by the way. It's not the most strategic game I've ever played. So if you look at this board, what is a number you love to land on? Besides 100, by the way. So that doesn't count. So what is a number you love to land on? And the number is, by the way, 28. What is a number you hate to land on? You want to avoid this number. Yep. For those of you that said 87, of course, right? It's the slide that takes you all the way down to the bottom. So my question to you is this. Who are the 28s in your organization? Who are the 87s in your organization? And how do we bring more 28s into our organizations, into our lives. And we can't avoid the 87s, right? But how do we help the 87s to become more 28s? And you'll know the 28s in your organizations. These are the people that are great listeners, right? These are people that do a fantastic job of getting the input of everyone in a meeting, right? They're not the ones that are talking the whole time. They really care about getting the perspective of others and bringing the whole team together. So look at those 28s in your organizations, and how do we amplify them in our companies? So the interesting thing about energy, and I'm gonna provide you now with one of the most important rules, and this is called the 4-minute rule. And I learned this rule from Steve McDermott. You may know Steve there in the UK. He won the European Speaker of the Year award 3 times. And Steve has had probably more of this particular rule has probably had more of an impact than anything else that I've learned from anyone over the last 12 years. And I'm going to provide you the 4-minute rule right now. And the 4-minute rule goes like this. The first 4 minutes of any interaction matter the most. Why? Because it's what people remember most, number one. That's what the research tells us. And number 2, we know that energy and your mood are contagious almost as the common cold. And if you think about it, if you've ever been by an elevator, and there's someone at the elevator and they're pushing the button maybe 10 or 15 times, hoping that if they push the button fast enough and more enough, that the elevator will come faster, right? When they do that, don't you feel just a little bit anxious, right? And you can do this experiment too. Hit that elevator button 30 times around a group of people and see what happens. They're going to feel anxious. Or you're in a meeting and you're brainstorming, and every time someone provides an idea, the same person keeps on shooting it down and shooting it down, shooting it down. What do you think that does to the mood on that team? So it's contagious, and there's a reason it's contagious. We have something in our brains called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are when we take on the energy and emotions of others. And as I just explained, whether you've got that person in the meeting room or you're touching that elevator button, our mirror neurons are firing and taking on the emotions of other people. So there's a biology behind this. So when you take those into account, the 4-minute rule is this, right? The first 4 minutes of every interaction matter most because that's what people remember, and we can promote that positive energy through our organizations. So think about the 4-minute rule with your colleagues, your customers, right? What are we doing those first 4 minutes in all of those interactions? And as Steve helped me to understand, the most important customers are your family. And I used to be guilty of this myself. I'd come home from a business trip, and I'd walk into the house, and because I'm a bit of a germaphobe, the first thing on my mind, of course, I was excited to see my family. But the first thing on my mind was, okay, I want to get out of my suit, and I want to wash my hands, and I'm going to be with my family. So I'd open the door. My kids would be all excited to see me. I'd be excited to see them, and I'd say, kids, hold on. I'll be right with you. I'm just going to go wash my hands and change my clothes. And I realized I got the first 4 minutes wrong. And so now when I come home, I ask myself the question before I get out of the car, what would the world's greatest dad do the first 4 minutes? What would the world's greatest dad do the first 4 minutes? And I come into the house, I'm on my knees, I'm asking my kids how they're doing, I give my wife a kiss, and I ask how their day's going. And what's interesting is I realize this has had a transformative effect on the energy in my home. Transformative. And what I've also learned is when I'm totally engaged with my children the first 4 minutes, they're sick of dad and they're ready to move on and do something else. So that's the energy side of energizing a team. And let's talk a little bit about the motivational side. And I'm going to talk about the work of Teresa Mabile from Harvard. And this is the interactive point of this presentation. So I'm going to be posting a poll here in a moment. And what I want you to think about is I want you to rank order these motivational influences that you can see here below. And Teresa did this exercise with approximately 700 managers. And what I want you to think about is, of these motivational influences, what do you think can motivate people the most? What do you think matters most in motivating people? This isn't for you, but this is for people in your organization. So I'm going to open this poll right now. And in real time, I want you to rank, which I want you to determine what you think, and you can only pick one. What do you think is the most important motivational influence below? So go ahead. Let's see what the results are. So recognition's coming up high. Clear goals, okay. Give you another minute. Okay. So, what Teresa found in her work was recognition, managers selected recognition the most as well. So, here's the catch. The answer is making progress. And this is new research. What Teresa did is she studied work teams, and she collected about 12,000 pages of diaries. And she studied those diaries, and she was really interested in inner work life. What motivates people the most in their inner work life? And what she found from doing this analysis, and it's a little bit of a trick because an important word was left out. What she found as the number one motivator in the world was making progress in meaningful work. Not just making progress, but it's making progress in meaningful work. And the translation here is it's all about small wins. How do we may have broad goals, but how are we getting small wins? How are we making progress along the way in meaningful work? So our tasks may be simple at times, but if we know that that task is important to our team, we know that's important to our organization, it has meaning for us. It has meaning for us. So think about what it takes to make sure that we're really clear about sharing with people the why of what we're doing, the why of our work. And when we focus on the why and we focus on generating small wins, we can have a transformative impact in driving the motivation and engagement of others in our organization. And of course, there's another side to engagement. And I'm going to now play you the development side of the equation. I'm going to play you a video of Michael Treacy. He's the author of Double-Digit Growth. And I want you to watch this clip. And as many of you are probably focused on in your organization is growth. And what Michael's going to provide is the secret to driving growth in your organizations. And it's two things. Let's watch this clip now. I'm not sure if this clip is playing. So I'm going to go back into presentation mode. Sorry for the technical difficulty. So I'm going to give you now the Cliff Notes version of that presentation. What Michael says in that presentation is what he's landed on. And I think what's unique about Michael is he has spent years as both a practitioner but also a theorist. He's written books about it, but he's also practiced it. And what Michael shares around the two most important elements to driving growth in an organization. Number one is focusing on the customer and customer value in particular. And number two is developing managers really at all levels of an organization. And he asks an important question, and I think it's an exercise you should all do and all do with your managers as well, which is look at the last 30 to 60 days on your calendar and circle the amount of time you have spent meeting with customers and key stakeholders inside the organization and how much time you've spent coaching and mentoring others in the organization. Because if you think about it, one of the most important requirements of any leader is to be in the talent management business and developing people, motivating, recognizing them, etc. And what we find is people are so busy, they aren't matching their time with their key priorities. And I think it's an important exercise we should all go through, because I think it provides an alarm, if you will, to that individual around the fact that, wow, I only spent 2 hours in the last 2 months developing people or meeting with customers. I need to change that. That's a key priority. So we need to create that awareness with our managers and people in our organizations around how we spend our time and matching our time with our key priorities, which is absolutely focusing customers and developing employees. Next is around collaborating to innovate. And if you think about it, innovation is very much a team sport. Linda Grattan, who's a professor at London Business School, I think has absolutely nailed it in terms of what's the glue to great collaboration. Number one, it's a cooperative mindset. And number two, and a cooperative mindset, by the way, is about it's a behavior, right? It's about, are you proactively willing and able to share information? And are you very proactive about it? Number two is boundary spanning. And this is about how, when you look at your team, are you reaching out to other departments? Are you reaching out to customers, important stakeholders, and bringing them into your meetings? Because the truth is, and if you've been part of an intact team for a while, you all tend to know the same things, but you all tend to not know the same things. So how are you bringing in that outside perspective into your team? And I think collaboration has become a very important topic. And I think we just need to be careful, because I think we need to be strategic about our collaboration. Because if I think we can go overboard in collaboration and it can be inefficient. I think we have to look at collaboration as efficiently as possible. And what Linda would tell you about being strategic about collaboration, it's including your key stakeholders, right? Again, internal and external into that process to make you successful. And when you do that, you generate new ideas that can make a difference. And I'm going to end with this, which is when you do meet and you do collaborate and you do bring fresh perspective and new ideas, you can find innovative processes and opportunities that you can replicate. Because I think innovation, a lot of people think of it as invention, but the truth is it's already been invented. Someone else has already done it. So it's really about discovering. And so when you do discover that innovation because you're doing a great job of boundary spanning, I'm going to now share with you one of the most powerful stories I've ever heard around how you can find and replicate success. I'm going to introduce you now to Jerry Sternin. Jerry Sternin works for Save the Children. And he worked for Save the Children, which is a children's relief organization. And in 1990, Jerry Sternin came to Vietnam because 60 to 70% of all children in Vietnam under the age of 5 suffered from some degree of malnutrition. So Jerry flies into Vietnam. By the way, he doesn't speak the language. He literally gets off the plane. And picture this. You just got off this plane. You don't speak the language. And a government official comes over. And he says, Jerry, I'm so pleased you're here to help us with this important challenge. But I have to tell you, I know you were planning to be here a few years, but my colleagues tell me you can only be here for 6 months. So picture it. You've landed, you've got 6 months to solve malnutrition in Vietnam. And you've got poor sanitation, severe poverty, clean water is difficult to obtain. How do you take the next step? And in Jerry's case, he realized he could only control what he could control. He knew he could make a difference in sanitation or poverty or getting clean water in 6 months. And so what he focused on, again, is what he could control. So what he did is he said he just went to one village. And he gathered a meeting of all the mothers in this village, and he asked them for their help. He said, look, this is who I am. This is what I'm trying to achieve. I want to help nourish your children in a better way in this village. Will you help me? And, of course, all the mothers said yes. So what they first did, and you can see here in this picture on the left, he had all the children weighed and measured. In this case, he could find out who the healthy children were. And once they identified who those healthy children were, because when you look at the statistics, about 30% should be, what they did is they shadowed those mothers to see if they did something differently around how they fed their children. And what they found out is those mothers fed their children much differently. So what the mothers of the healthy children did is they fed their children 4 times a day. 4 bowls full of rice, but they did something quite different than the other mothers. As you can see here in this picture on the bottom, the mothers would go out into the rice paddies and pick up small pieces of shrimp and mix that in to the rice. They also collected the green leaves of sweet potato, even though it was considered a low-class food, and mixed that into the rice as well. So they were getting protein, they were getting vitamins, and fed their kids 4 times a day. Now, the mothers of the other children were only fed 2 times a day, large bowls full of rice, and so their stomachs weren't able to absorb the nutrients, the little that were there. So when Jerry discovered this, and think about your own organizations, when does information become transformation? When does information become transformation? If we just share this information, are we going to get the results and the change that we want? And Jerry understood the answer was no. So what Jerry understood, if he was going to turn this information into transformation, he had to turn the mothers of the healthy children into teachers. And so as you can see here in this picture, he had the mothers of the healthy children conduct teaching workshops. And what they did is they had the children of the malnourished kids actually go out into the rice paddies, collect the shrimp themselves, get the green leaves of the sweet potato, and bring that to this meeting, as you can see here. And the healthy mothers were involved in the process of teaching the other mothers how to feed their kids in a very healthy way. And so this whole concept is about positive deviance. And positive deviance is this: when you have individuals that have access to the same resources, there are some that get innovative outcomes, transformative outcomes. So think about the positive deviance, if you will, in your organization. They may be in sales. They may be in marketing. These are the outliers. Find out what they are doing differently. And how do you replicate it in your organization? How do you turn these people into teachers in your organization? So what were the results of Jerry's outcome? Well, 6 months after Jerry left that village, malnutrition decreased 65%, and it stayed that way. This practice of positive deviance has now spread to 2.2 million villages and 265 villages and now into 20 countries, all because one person who didn't have the resources, couldn't speak the language, didn't have the positional authority, focused on the positive and wanted to make a difference. Thank you for your time today. I'm now going to turn it over to James.
Thank you, Taavo, for that. That was fantastic to pack as much information as you did into that space of time. I think on behalf of everybody in the room, I'd like to thank you for that very much indeed. Just to let you all know, we will be sending you a link to the recording of this session, as well as giving you access to the video that Taavo referred to. We'll also make sure that you've got any information you need regarding the Skillsoft Leadership Advantage portal and other services that Computerworld can offer around leadership development. And we'd like as well to invite some feedback on this session as well. So you will get all that through an email. So again, just want to thank Taavo again very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Taavo. I'm just going to close the session now. Wish you all a great weekend, and thank you very much.